Starting. Okay, I believe the recording has begun. Okay, here today with AJ Kern, American Patriot. So glad to see you again so soon, AJ. It's been such a long time, but now that we're in lockdown, we seem to be seeing much more of each other online, and these activities increase and go forward, onward and upward. We have adapted, adopted, and improved. Today, the very important topic, AJ has a lot of information to share with us about Event 201, a science fiction movie. So it seems it would have made a good movie. There have been several made on this topic, actually, including V for Vendetta, which mentions COVID-19 in 2007. But what is Event 201, AJ? Share with us your knowledge.
Well, I think that this is good information I mean, some people who watch your videos may be aware of Event 201, but then there are others that may not have. I heard of it, but I was talking to my doctor a few days ago, and he brought it up. He's like, "Hey, have you seen this Event 201?" And I'm like, "Well, I've heard of it, but I didn't really go to the web page or pay any attention to it." And so he started talking about it, and it's really pretty interesting. I went home and looked at it. So it's unelected people, the globalists, who took it upon themselves at great expense to put together like a war game. Really, it's like a war game. They created a news media. They called it GNN, like G in giraffe, rather than CNN. Put together these fake journalists, and they're reporting about what's going on and everything. And so this is funded by the Johns Hopkins World Economic Forum, which I keep saying to people, you need to, they're right out there about it, about moving towards globalism and wanting to eliminate our borders, one world government. So that's the World Economic Forum. I've gone there and signed up, so I get their newsletter, and I can see when they've put together some new nonsense and follow them. Like one of the newer things is the World Economic Forum wants to provide incentive for the people like myself who are saying, well, I'm not going to take the vaccine. So how do they discuss how they're going to deal with people like me or groups like myself who aren't going to cooperate, and how do they give incentive? And I think I saw something the other day. A nurse had gone on and said she wasn't going to take the vaccine, but others that she worked with were, and they were going to get a gift card. Wow. Okay.
Incentives followed by inducements, followed by punishments and loss of privileges in terms of a card. But right. They're rolling out the public relations with different racial groups in different ways. So they're marketing this and pitching this to different interest groups as a block. And some of that data I'd like to get into further, maybe in another session, but go back to these phony news medias that they created, this Davos, right? It's the World Economic Forum. And in June, they declared that COVID-19 would be the opportunity for the great global reset of our economies.
Right. And also it's important to know that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they help fund all of this, to put this little game together. And I think most of us know that, I wouldn't trust Bill Gates to take my dog for a walk,
I wouldn't trust Bill Gates to remove a virus from my Microsoft computer-based operating systems. I wouldn't trust him with a subscription. He's the guy who ruined Skype. You have the same medical degree as Bill Gates, by the way, which is none. We just want a full disclosure, myself included.
He thinks he's so self-important because he's got money that, I mean, and recall that he thinks so much of himself that he's the one that funded Common Core. And at the time, I just thought people are losing their minds to be going along with this. Parents didn't raise a ruckus about it. And because at the time he gave a speech about it, you know, he funded it. He gave money to the U.S. Department of Education, I believe it was, and to get this rolling. And he said at the time, well, we don't even really know if this works. Wow, that's great. So all of our kids are guinea pigs, and now we know it doesn't work.
Yeah, just like Vista, they
Right.
ruined XP.
So why would we want him getting together with all others who think they're so self-important and appoint themselves to positions? I mean, to be doing this little game, and they're trying to think of all these angles of how the smarter people in the world need to control transportation, vaccines, food supply, and shift money from the United States through the World Bank to the poor countries. Like we're always responsible. The American worker is always responsible for these other countries that have dictatorships, and they fail because of socialism and communism, and yet they always come to the United States for the money. So they discuss all of this. And
Bill Gates went to the event 201, and I don't understand why we would trust a man like Bill Gates to produce a vaccination when he's a guy who believes there are too many people on planet Earth. So you're going to let them put a needle in your arm based on a guy who thinks we have too many people around us. Oh, please put something in my body. Great idea.
right.
What happened at event 201? What else occurred there?
Well, what's interesting is they this is a so they have a collaboration among governments, international organizations, and global businesses. Like I said, unelected. They call it a public-private cooperation for pandemic preparedness and response. And I want to point out to people, I always said this public-private relationship that we hear all the time now is not good for citizens, because just like the refugee resettlement program, they couldn't do it through the government completely. So what do? They funnel our tax dollars through a private organization and to actually accomplish their goal. And the problem with that is that you can't, they're not transparent. When they're using private organizations, you can't submit a freedom of information request to a private organization. And so now they're using our tax dollars in a way that's not transparent. We can't ask for the data and actually get a real picture of how much we're spending or what's going on. And that's why public-private cooperation is really not a good thing. If you're a conservative, you know, you should get that's how they use our money without being transparent. And so that should always be a red flag. Okay. So everyone should go to event 201 and just start reading how they are talking about controlling the outbreak, how prepared, how they want to use the World Health Organization, which I don't trust. And
for good reason.
So if you go to the page, what's interesting is that they pick these players. They call them players. And one lady is from Marriott. One guy is with UPS. I don't know how some of these people are really qualified to be players on this little war game. The interesting guy, though, is this George, I guess you pronounce it Gao, G-A-O. You probably know how.
Gao, yeah. George Gao, yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's really kind of the interesting character.
We'll provide links too in the description below this video. We'll give a link to the viewers to go and research this for yourselves. By all means, check this out, because these people are clearly concerned in their event 201. It's a massive kind of computer simulation game that they got together and played in real time. It's like Dungeons and Dragons. Bill Gates would have grown up accustomed to playing that in his garage when he was designing his first computer. But here they're concerned clearly by including Marriott and the UPS. Was it UPS, AJ?
Yes.
So they're concerned with logistics and supply chain. Right there, it shows you they're thinking on a strategic level about how things are going to be moved around in this new environment, this new normal that they've all created for us, because we're still in lockdown up here in Minnesota. We can't, Mayo Clinic's cafeteria, recently pictures have been released. It's fully operational. Within the Mayo Clinic building itself, there's people mingling and eating in a restaurant, but all of our commercial enterprises are shut down. Cafe Loop gets closed, most expensive restaurant in Rochester gets closed, $50 a plate appetizers and entrees, but now it's turned into a student lounge for University of Minnesota students. So we're through the looking glass and down the rabbit hole here. In event 201, did they do anything else, like in terms of predicting which groups would be most oppositional to getting the vaccine?
Well,
like
I'm gonna get to that in just a moment. I wanted to finish with this George Fu Gao.
Oh, yeah.
He's a professor and is the Director General, Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention, professor in the Institute of Microbiology, Chinese Academy of Sciences, president of the Chinese Society of Biotechnology, and several other things. And so remember, this event happened October 2019, shortly before we know this virus in Wuhan escaped or whatever it did.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that this guy, the game is over and he goes back to China, and shortly after the virus is released somehow. And, there's been some questions about what his role may have been. Now, social media have said, oh, well, this was just a coincidence that they practiced a pandemic of COVID, because it was about COVID, a COVID virus, right?
Right.
A coronavirus. And so it was just a coincidence. I wanted to point out that the Gates Foundation top guy, Christopher Elias, he was part of this, of course. So people should take a look at some of these individuals that were participating. They're so self-important. But if you go to their recommendations, which is getting to what you were talking about, their call to action, what I find, since we have limited time, what I found was really interesting was governments and the private sector should assign a greater priority to developing methods to combat mis- and disinformation prior to the next pandemic response. Well, what did they do? What did we see after October, at the beginning of this year so much? We saw, and you can go to their videos, they have a video, and one of them is on the communications. They want to control the messaging, and this one is called segment number 4 video, communications discussion. And I watched just in the beginning, they're talking about social media controlling the message because they don't want disinformation, misinformation by trolls. I guess that would be by you and I. So what did we see beginning in this year especially was Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. they all crack down on any conservative voice. And even when you post something that you know is factual about the coronavirus, they put up their warning, you know. Yeah. And so
it takes you to a propaganda website. If you accidentally touch that warning, it takes you to a disinformation page that informs you that not all information on the internet is trustworthy, and you shouldn't trust all these sources, and you should come to us for your information. But when we go to the local media inside the bubbles of our communities, each and every local page is identical with the COVID misinformation from day to day. They release numbers that, you know, numbers of cases, and it doesn't tell you if somebody's recovered or not, or if they had it last year. It's just they tested positive for the antibodies, which means maybe you had it last year. You know, if you had malaria 30 years ago and you get tested for malaria today, it should be part of your DNA strain that you had malaria. It doesn't mean you're positive right now. So they're really muddying the waters to make all information irrelevant. So banning conservative voices, even President Trump's Twitter account, right? Putting those little banners, it's almost like a badge of honor at this point, because everyone recognizes that what they're doing is complete malarkey. They're releasing data in order to confuse people. And yeah, we saw a lot of that in the run up to the election. The numbers make no sense. They don't define what their numbers are trying to explicate for us in this situation. But you must obey for your safety. You must comply. I'm sorry, does that tie in? What they're really concerned about is trolls, they say, but that's just an insult, bounces off us like Teflon.
Well, they're smarter than we are, you know. So go back to the recommendations page and read number 7 on this controlling the information. It says that governments will need to partner with traditional and social media companies to research and develop nimble approaches to countering misinformation. This will require developing the ability to flood media with fast, accurate, and consistent information. Public health authorities should work with private employers and trusted community leaders, such as faith leaders, to promulgate factual information to employees and citizens. And it goes on. But they want to influence the message, they want to control the message, and they want you and I to shut up. You know, that's really what it is, because they're so smart. I wouldn't trust these guys. I mean, basically what needs to happen with the social media is the Congress needs to look at handling them the same way that what happened with Ma Bell years ago. The telephone company controlled, you know, they had a monopoly. Mm-hmm. And to think that they would listen in on our phone calls and disconnect us because they didn't agree with what we were discussing, or they would decide, well, you can't call anyone in this, you know, let's say Venezuela, you know, or South Korea. We're just not going to allow phone calls, you know, from the United States that we don't know who you're talking to. That's what this is like. Mm-hmm. And so the Congress has to treat the social media in that way. Is how do you break it up? How do you say, no, we have free speech, whether you agree with it or not. I have a right to put my opinion out on, well, even on Zuckerberg. I think something's wrong with him. I mean, look at his eyes. He looks like, you know, something's happened to him. Even Bill Gates, you know, you catch him in some photographs, you know, something's not right. And I have a right to say that. But, you know, maybe Zuckerberg will look at, you know, they'll look at this video and they'll take it down because I said something about him looking like he's been possessed, you know, and he's got dead eyes. But
reptilian comes to mind. But,
I don't know if I believe that, but I do believe that we are in a spiritual warfare because the Word of God says that we are. And if you don't believe that, just go play with a Ouija board and then go out by yourself in the middle of the forest one night and see how you feel. Because, you know, you can get yourself in trouble with the spiritual world. And
I heard a story about Bill Gates recently. He was walking down the road and he came upon close to a graveyard. So he started whistling as he was walking past the graveyard. And suddenly there was a companion who came up beside him, and it was Mark Zuckerberg. And he kind of put his arm around Bill Gates and he said, don't worry, I used to whistle when I walked past a graveyard when I was alive too. So
yeah,
these guys are so far from humanity right now. They live in a separate world from the rest of us in terms of the wealth and the power and the money, and that leads to arrogance. And how we entrust them with developing technologies that are going to alter our DNA, possibly affect women's fertility. To me, that's a big issue. I started hearing about the effect that this COVID-19 virus antidote, if you will, may have on the uteri. And it's people should think very carefully about subjecting themselves to the needle. They rolled this out in 9 months. And if you were going to buy a nice home, you would read the fine print, you would have a lawyer look it over, you would have a tax assessor give you some advice, you would have a building inspector look it over. You'd put more thought into purchasing your car insurance than people are putting into putting this needle in their arm. We're not told that it contains baby parts and bits of male fetus's lungs and whatnot. I mean, we just don't know what's in it, and to develop it so quickly. And look, I trust President Trump, but this is one thing that I've really kind of wondered about. And it has nothing to do with him, but we're trusting these companies to produce something, and then they write in the fine print that they are never going to be sued for any of the ill effects of the antidote of the vaccine. By the way, if we're chasing last year's flu with a vaccine this year, it doesn't make any sense. We've never done that before. For such a small effect, we have more live cases of tuberculosis, wet tuberculosis. We have more wet leprosy, in courtesy of Catholic Charities and Lutheran Social Services in Minnesota than we do. We have 20 new identifiable communicable diseases which have been imported into Minnesota from Africa. And yet we're going to line up and let someone put something in our arms that they have not fully explained what it is. And they don't feel they have a responsibility to. But did Event 21 anticipate some of this resistance in communities? And did they, I mean, it seems they might have
right. Well, there is something about the resistors. You know, how do you give them incentive to take the vaccine? And short of saying what we know or what we believe may happen is that they will give us back what has been our rights. I have a right to go to the grocery store. I have a right to go to the theater, but they will give those rights back conditionally, right? You know, if you took the vaccine or if you've been tested. I don't want to be tested. You're gathering my DNA information, maybe. I don't really know. I can't say that. Like, that's the problem with this whole thing, is you don't know everything factually, and you're digging and digging and digging, trying to figure it out. But they have put out, you know, these people have tried to control it to such an extent that the CDC will put up information, and then it's like, oops, that's not going with our narrative, and then they'll take it down. And you're like, wait a minute, where'd that go? I saw it. It's like Fauci, who said, oh, we don't need masks. It's just to make people feel better. You know, well, it's kind of hard to find that. And now it's like, yo, you got to wear a mask. So
Dr. Fauci might have been one of those doctors in the 50s who would line up and, hey, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Chesterfields for a cooler, lighter smoke. it's healthy, you know. And then
Yeah.
yeah, so science, you're supposed to believe the science and take their word for it. And it seems anybody with critical thinking skills is being shunned at this point. And to give us back our rights if we submit to this injection, like vis-a-vis a card, or now you can fly a plane, now you can enter your place of employment, now you can go back to church. It's truly the mark of the beast. I mean, to get a little bit biblical here, because it's saying you can't participate or engage in commerce or exchange or any kind of pursuit of happiness unless you submit to this injection. And of course, the mask has already done that to our communities, to the extent that you're not allowed to go to work unless you've got the mask on, even if it's bad for you. You know, there's a new study. They took your study with the hand dryers in bathrooms was interesting enough that you swabbed the filter, the interior of a hand dryer in a public restroom, you put it in a petri dish, and it blossomed like a Brazilian rainforest. And they did that with a mask. After wearing the mask for only an hour, they swabbed that thing out, and they found every manner of streptococci and bacteria growing and viruses. So now you have this exhaust pipe harness that you're strapping on your face, and you're preventing your body from exchanging gases with the outside world. It also lessens our immune systems for every other sort of cold and flu that normally wouldn't have been a problem, because we would all have herd immunity and it wouldn't spread. So what they're creating are the conditions for some further mass panic if people ever did really start the zombie apocalypse, you know.
Well, these are people who, you know, Bill Gates, as you pointed out, believes in, you know, we've got too many people on the planet. And so that should make you nervous. And
Yes.
the fact that most of these people, I guarantee you, believe in abortion. And so we're supposed to believe that they have our best interest in mind? No.
Right.
So what they really figured out at the end of this is that they needed a pandemic. They needed a pandemic to incite fear and tell people to cooperate. And the mask is about control, because, you know, you put a mask on, aside from what you just said, you know, I can smoke a cigarette through a mask. So it's not stopping a virus. This
Just
whole
want
thing.
to let everybody know that AJ Kern is not recommending that you smoke. She's merely alliterating a point to further a dialogue. She's not a smoker. She's not advocating tobacco products or cigarettes in any way, shape, or form. Sorry, just a brief disclaimer for those who are going to rub bleach on their eyes because they think that's what we're saying is the way to cure COVID. But it is hard to get a good bowl of bat stew these days, though.
Right. So this exercise, they started it with a breakout among the pigs in Brazil, and then it quickly began spreading. And then someone got on an airplane and went to, it's not Spain, Portugal. And then it just all started getting out of control and everything. And so then they discuss how they're going to control the message and how they're going to control food supply and the money and all these things. And I'm just thinking, who the heck are you to be even, you know, who self-appointed them, you know? So
you just brought up a solid concrete example that I'd forgotten when you mentioned food distribution and food supply. That's one of the first things they did, of course, was shut down the restaurants. And then Governor Walz announced a plan for distributing food to school children vis-a-vis school cafeterias and restaurants. And then they very nicely sent out these messages. There were billboards to this effect in our town, Rochester, billboards that said, if you're hungry, children, go to a restaurant, go to the school, call this number. If you're hungry, we will bring you food. We will drive food to your home. We will bring you lunches. We'll bring you meals. It was a massive Meals on Wheels campaign, which I see as a kind of socialist, globalist grooming campaign to teach children that their benefits come from the state. They're derived from the government, and it's a metacognitive lesson that they learn that my dad doesn't give me food. My dad's gone. My mom doesn't give me food. My mom doesn't have a job. She doesn't work. Where do I get food? I get food from the government. I get food from schools. The school feeds me. Governor Walz feeds me. Mayor Norton feeds me. And how generous they are, how beneficent that they're looking out for my interests. What they're doing to children is phenomenal, because it's a massive campaign to lure them into statism and faith in the government at the same time when they shut down churches the week before Easter and then cancel all our holidays, which we've spoken about before, because these are supposed to be the Christmas sessions, but we're still in lockdown. When is this going to end? They keep saying 4 more weeks or 1 more month. And Biden says 100 days. 100 days. It's a nice number.
Well, they're taking our God-given right to pursue, well, our freedom, cutting off our freedom and our ability to pursue happiness, if you will, but to provide for ourselves. And they want us to depend on government because they want to make themselves God. And that's the whole point of globalism. That's the whole point of bringing in days. That's the whole point of bringing in the Antichrist. I believe that because it's written in the Word. I know a lot of people like to stay away from that, but if you look at it this way, they're taking our God-given rights that we've recognized historically in this country, and that's what's given us our foundation, is that we have God-given rights. And they are slowly trying to figure out how do they take those away and give them back conditionally, and at the same time gain all this control over all of our behavior. And with the new technology, they're finding a way to do it. But with the COVID pandemic, which I don't think it's really reached pandemic levels, because you don't have people dying in the street. You really don't. I mean, we had to go up to the emergency room at the hospital and here where I am, and the hospital was empty because you might have city centers that are having a bigger outbreak, but you can't, to treat every area like one size fits all is just a way for them to control everyone at every corner of the earth. And when you are forcing people to wear something on their face, it's about taking away our individualism. Now they're separating us, and in separating us, it also has the effect of not allowing us to group and organize. They're taking away our ability on social media to organize. Mm-hmm. And so I actually went to a meeting last night. It was kind of this growing group of local people who are saying, we've got to stop this right now. And it was discussed that the sheriffs actually have the power to stop this because they take an oath to support the Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic. And when you have the governor giving out these executive orders that are unconstitutional, and you have health departments being used, they're weaponized. They've weaponized health departments. The sheriff has the ability. So let's say you're a cafe, and the health department shows up and says, well, you aren't supposed to be open today, so we're citing you $1,000, and if you keep this up, we're going to come back every day and cite you $1,000, and you're maybe going to spend jail time. Well, that person, the owner of the cafe, should be able to call up the local sheriff and say, I need some help down here. Sheriff should be able to come in and say, hey, health department person, you're on private property. You need to leave. You have no power here. The sheriff could do that. And the sheriffs have to come to realize by people contacting them and saying, we want you to put this to a stop, because you took an oath to uphold our constitutional rights, uphold the Constitution, and this is violating our rights. I have a right. Every business is essential because everyone needs to be able to earn a living, put food on the table. And so when you have some unqualified person sitting in the governor's seat deciding who's essential and not, and allowing Amazon to get richer and richer and these bigger companies, while you're putting people out of business and eliminating the way people can actually make a living, this is unprecedented, and the sheriffs actually have the ability to stop it. They are the ones who have the ability to stop it, and the people need to start writing letters to their county commissioners, because we could stop this at a local level, because we see that the Republican establishment, GOP, most of them in the state legislatures and in the Congress aren't doing much of anything. And when they do something, it's to make it look like it's busy work. Oh, they want it to look like they're actually doing something and they're not doing anything. So it's all about big talk, political talk, but they're not accomplishing anything, and they're not fighting the good fight, and they're not stopping this, not aggressively enough.
And AJ, that bureaucracy of passing the buck, whereas the sheriff's department is the chief law enforcement officer for a county, for the local basic political operating unit at the county level. The sheriff is the head of the law enforcement and should have the capacity to do that. Also say to these health inspectors and the people who are surreptitiously making movies and snapping photos of people not social distancing, unless, well, there's a certain amount of reporting that needs to go on, as when people discover that there's some restaurants that are not cracked down on. There's some places of worship that are still open. There's some, no sound?
No, we lost it.
Oh, I'm sorry. But in any case, AJ, this is a really good moment to stop at this point in this session. What I was saying really wasn't that essential. It may come through on the broadcast, but let's call this an end to part one of this discussion. Oh, your mute button is going on and off. Oh, no. Okay, let's time out. Okay.
I can't hear, so.
Yup.
We're good.
There. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. It was great. I can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me, but
I hear you.
You can hear me? Okay. Yeah. Well, this is long distance technology. Doesn't always work.
Pink.
So, okay. I think that's about it anyway.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.